I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
Office of President of the United States.
This is Asian Insider, and I'm Nirmal Ghosh. Now, we've just had a very significant change of guard, even a radical change of guard, just a few blocks from where I sit in Washington, D.C. Inauguration Day was an interesting day, to say the least, and there was a lot of relief all around when it was over without any drama, of course helped by the fact that there were 25,000 armed troops protecting the process. One part of President Joe Biden's speech touched on foreign policy. He spoke about the restoration of America's relationships. He talked about repairs. He talked about leading again globally and leading by example and being a trusted partner. And later, White House spokesperson Jen Psaki spoke of regaining a seat at the global table and engaging with partners and allies.
So here's my message to those beyond our borders. America has been tested, and we've come out stronger for it. We will repair our alliances and engage with the world once again, not to meet yesterday's challenges, but today's and tomorrow's challenges. And we'll lead not merely by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. We'll be a strong and trusted partner for peace, progress, and security.
Well, two crucial allies in Asia are the Republic of Korea and Japan. And joining me today to share the view from where they sit are my colleagues in Tokyo and Seoul. Chang Choon is the Straits Times correspondent in South Korea, and Walter Sim is the Straits Times correspondent in Japan. Thank you very much for joining us. And Choon, if I may get straight to you without further ado, how much interest was there in this drama in Washington, in Korea generally? Were people sort of glued to it? Were they following it?
Hi, Namal. Yes, definitely. There's a lot of interest in what happens in Washington. People are actually, I think, quite happy to see Joe Biden become the next president. And with a new change in leadership comes new opportunities. The previous 4 years, I think, have been like a roller coaster ride. Not to mention with COVID coming into the picture. Lots of changes and relations have been strained. So I think people are looking forward to relations getting back on and resolving all the issues that have not been resolved. For example, the military burden sharing, as well as the return of wartime operation control.
So has there been there was an official reaction from President Moon Jae-in, right? Could you break it down a little for us? What does South Korea really want from the new dispensation in DC?
Okay. Yes. President Moon tweeted this morning. He congratulated Biden on his inauguration, and then he said America is back, and that this new beginning will make democracy even greater. And then he also said that he expressed confidence in the path that the U.S. has been taking, and as an ally, they will continue to cooperate with the U.S. to keep the Korean Peninsula and the region peaceful and prosperous. And then he also used this term that has become like a tagline: "We go together." It's in Korean, "같이 갑시다." This term was used by Biden when he wrote a commentary or opinion op-ed for Yonhap News Agency much earlier. So I think there's this sense that Korea wants to work closer together with the US, wants to strengthen the alliance, and there are many issues at stake here. South Korea under President Moon Jae-in, he is a lot more pro-engagement. He wants to engage with North Korea. That's why you see in the past 4 years, there's been a lot of effort to try to engage North Korea in talks, whether it's inter-Korean or he tried to become a mediator for talks with the US. And we saw progress. Yes, we did. We saw a meeting between Kim Jong-un and the previous President Donald Trump in Singapore. But it stopped, for the past, since February 2019, right? There's been very, very little progress. And I think the Moon Jae-in administration hopes that with a new US administration, there will be changes. There will be new momentum.
Walter, basically the same question to you. I mean, unlike Korea, there were no threats to take US troops out unless Japan paid more and so forth. And yet, and of course, former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and Donald Trump got on famously and played golf and were great friends and all that. And, the saying goes that Shinzo Abe knew how to handle Donald Trump. But what about Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga? I mean, do you foresee a strengthening of the US-Japan relationship now? What does Japan seek from Washington? Could you take us through that?
Sure. Thanks, Nomal. I think one very interesting thing about the relationship that former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe forged with, former President Donald Trump is in what a lot of Japanese experts and observers term personal diplomacy, and there are still question marks as to whether Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga, who himself is not very experienced in foreign policy, able to build such a close relationship with President Biden. I think that remains in the works. Suga has made it known that he hopes to visit Washington for a face-to-face meeting with Biden as soon as possible. Some media reports floated the idea of him flying to Washington in early February, right after the inauguration, but that seems unlikely given that Biden is preoccupied with a lot of domestic challenges. And I think a date being floated now is in spring, possibly late March or early April. But I think there are still a lot of question marks to this relationship. One thing that Suga hopes the US would be able to work closely with Japan on multilateral issues, be it climate change, be it the free and open Indo-Pacific. And I think in these fronts, Japan is heartened by the US return. But on the flip side, I think Japan was a little bit, disappointed in Trump's loss, to put it very crudely, in the sense that Japan does see some good things out of Trump's foreign policy. In Trump's disruptive behavior towards meeting North Korean chairman Kim Jong-un, that basically put a halt to missiles flying over Japanese territory. That was possibly the closest Japan has been in decades resolving the North Korean abduction issue. And so in Japan, that is actually seen as a plus. As well as China policy, Trump was a lot more harsher on China than Obama ever was. And I think Japan kind of sees the US behavior on that front as kind of a balancing behavior, as balancing the relations in East Asia. Well, in a sense, it's confrontational, definitely, but yet Japan hopes that the US can stand its ground against China, that is increasingly more assertive in, say, the Senkakus, as well as in all sorts of multilateral issues such as trade and climate change as well. So on that front, if the Biden administration is able to pursue as equally a hard line on China, I think Japan would be heartened. There are other issues as well. For instance, host nation support that Japan does that has been left in the air with the Trump administration. Discussions are supposed to start last year, but I think they never really got underway after the election loss and whatnot. So I think it would be interesting to see the direction that the US takes on these talks, in the sense that Trump, as we all know, has been very harsh on wanting Japan to pay more troops, even if the US did not threaten a full withdrawal of US troops from Japanese territory. Well, Japan, of course, is reluctant to pay more, saying that it has already paid its fair share. And so I think that's something that is worth watching going forward, as to the kinds of military demands or the kinds of security alliance demands that the US has on Japan. One thing I think that Japan hopes the US can intervene is in the deteriorating ties with South Korea. We see Obama having played a very active role in mediating between the two wartime enemies. And well, ties between Japan and South Korea have hit a new low in recent weeks over wartime labor as well as comfort women issues. And I think it remains to be seen really how much of a role Biden as well as his pick for Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, would do in mediating between the two sides.
So, Walter, has there been there's been an official reaction, right, from the government of Japan? Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, so Prime Minister Suga, just moments after Biden was inaugurated, wrote a tweet saying in English, saying, "Congratulations to President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris on your inauguration. Japan and the United States are allies tied firmly by bonds and shared universal values. I look forward to working with you and your team to reinforce our alliance and to realize a free and open Indo-Pacific." He also spoke to reporters at the Prime Minister's office this morning, in the morning after the inauguration, and basically he said that he hopes to work closely with Biden on such issues such as containing the COVID-19 pandemic as well as on climate change.
Choon, what is Korea's view of progressing on the issue with Japan? Is there any role the US can play? Does Korea hope that the US can play a role in that issue?
The history issue keeps coming back. In 2016, when they said that they settled the comfort woman issue and this final and irreversible agreement, but people don't accept it, especially the comfort women. So with the Moon Jae-in administration, they are trying to find a solution. They're trying to find a solution that the victims would be happy with. But I think it's difficult. And there's also the wartime forced labor issue. But the thing is, Moon Jae-in wants to improve relations with the US. And from there, he wants to kind of get his role of a mediator back. He wants to mediate relations between North Korea and the US again. As I said just now, he wants to leave a North Korea legacy. And in order to do that, there is a certain motivation for him to want to improve relations with Japan, because that would, that would be what the US wants. So I see some kind of effort being made, the Moon administration is trying to, extend an olive branch towards Japan. They want to be able to talk more with Japan. They want to be able to, discuss the issues and see if they can find a diplomatic solution.
Okay, Walter, last question actually to you before we run out of time. What is the view from Japan of the US-China relationship, which is now, it is obviously, we all know it's become increasingly adversarial, and it is likely to remain adversarial in substance, although there'll be a huge change in terms of the rhetoric, the actual diplomacy. And the Biden administration actually wants to work with China on certain aspects. What is Japan's view of, what does Japan hope for from the US-China relationship? Because that is seen as a crucial relationship across the region, right?
Yes. I think Japan hopes that US and China could work together again on some issues, but also hopes on the flip side, really, that the US can continue to maintain its hard posture on China on other issues. So be it human rights, for instance, that's an issue that Japan has really been focusing on in condemning, well, maybe not condemning in such terms, but in issuing protests against China on its treatment on, say, Hong Kong, on the Uyghurs. So Japan has been relatively vocal on that, and Japan expects the US to continue to push China on maintaining human rights on those issues. But Japan also sees the US as a check and balance on China, really, in terms of, say, trade, because in China being more assertive in areas such as its Belt and Road Initiative, as well as in global free trade, really, in say, it's wanting to join the CPTPP, as well as with the RCEP already having been signed in the region. I think Japan hopes that the US could play a larger role and be a more vocal proponent for free trade mechanisms, for multilateralism going forward. But yet Japan is also aware that the US does not, and the Biden administration does not really have the political capital to do that right now. And so in the void, in the vacuum of that, I think Japan is trying to, on the other hand, also hedge and build closer relations with other middle power countries like the United Kingdom, into really reinforcing the need for multilateralism in this day and age. There's also the free and open Indo-Pacific and other mechanisms that, like Quad, which Japan hopes that US can play a greater role going forward under the Biden administration. And I think Japan is hopeful that with Biden, the pivot to Asia under Obama would make a return.
Okay, Walter May Choon, thank you so much for your time today. Certainly, with this transition in Washington, D.C., the U.S.'s alliances in Asia will be closely watched. What will be really watched in particular is which Asian leaders meet with President Joe Biden and whether President Biden travels to Asia in the near future, or perhaps Vice President Kamala Harris or incoming Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. For Asian Insider, I'm Nirmal Ghosh.